The Big Bath City bid is the name for a community-driven venture to take Bath City Football Club, which is 125 years old, and turn it into a community-owned company and community-owned club. The big difference would be, at the moment, Bath City is owned by a small number of well-meaning, hard-working shareholders, but that's a very limited way for the club to move forwards. It means that the burden of running the club falls onto a small number of people who end up putting their hands in their own pockets, and it's led to a situation, as happens at most football clubs, where it's not really sustainable. So what we want to do is different in three ways. Firstly, we'll have a club that is democratically structured. It'll be a one person, one vote. So whether you buy £250 worth of shares or £25,000 worth of shares, you will still only get one vote. We think that's quite important. Secondly, the club will be run in a financially sustainable manner. So the days where we chase the dream by borrowing money, by getting people to put their hands in their own pockets, they will be gone. In its place, we will do everything we can to improve and increase the club's income, getting attendances up, creating new partnerships with various organisations to bring in new financial streams. And also, by being a community-owned club, you can tap into certain funding sources which just aren't available for private limited companies. And thirdly, and perhaps the biggest difference, a community-owned club would be much more outward-looking, much more embracing the city of Bath. It would be all about becoming part of this city's DNA, getting under the skin of Bath, becoming much more active in the local community.
It's a club with big debts. How are these going to be paid off?
Firstly, I think it's important to look at the debts. They're very manageable. The debts are only a very small fraction of the club's assets. So we're in a really healthy position as a club. Most clubs, when they look to change their structure towards supporter ownership or community ownership, do so because it's past the 11th hour and they're in danger of extinction. Bath City isn't in that situation, so we're quite lucky. But we do still have a chunk of debt that needs to be addressed, some of which needs to be paid off in the autumn. So the community share offer will deal with the most pressing debts, and depending on how much we raise, could even go and pay off the vast majority of the debts. Beyond that, any debt which is left over, we will address by increasing the club's income, by getting attendances up, by tapping into funding sources which aren't available to a limited company, and by generally marketing the club much better throughout the city.
Steve, the good thing about the club is, I suppose, it owns its own site. But how much of a future does the club have on its present site?
For a long time, there have been discussions and thoughts about should the club stay in Twerton, should it move somewhere else. At the moment, our focus is on switching the club into community ownership, because we think, regardless of where the club plays, that will give it a more sustainable, stronger footing in the future. Then there will need to be a proper open discussion about where the club should play. Anybody who's a shareholder in the club, anybody who's a fan of the club, would have a say in that. So we're very clear, we're not either the Twerton Preservation Society who are saying the club must stay at Twerton, but nor are we a group of people who are saying we have to leave Twerton. The honest answer is we just don't know at the moment what's best for Bath City, and it needs to be about what's best for Bath City. So once we get the club onto a more secure footing, then we will look at what the options are. If we were to stay in Twerton, could we make better use of the site? How could we bring in more income, either through a 3G pitch or through making use of the land that sits around the stadium? Those things need to be explored. Or if leaving was to be the best option, then where would be a good alternative site, and what would happen to the existing site? So all these things need to be discussed. The key points are nothing would be done without the input of the community as shareholders and the fans. And right now our focus is just on getting the club into community ownership, not worrying too much about where we play in the next 5 to 10 years.
You've got a September deadline, haven't you? What if you don't meet it?
We've got a number of options. Firstly, the September deadline is a bit of an artificial one which we've set ourselves. But we're already starting to think that, given the guts of what we're trying to do happens across the summer, that early September is probably not the best time. So we may push that back a bit. So that's one thing. Secondly, there are other options of social lending. There are social lenders who would give us a chunk of money at very favourable interest rates. Again, it's the sort of thing you can get if you're a community-owned organisation that you can't get if you're a limited company. So if we fall short, we could look at the option of social lending. But at the moment, the key message is we need to make sure we get as much money in as we can to make this a reality. We will worry about if we don't hit the target, if and when we get to that stage. And if people in Bath want a good football club in this sports-mad city to help put Bath on the map of the world's biggest game, then please do all you can. Please support us. Please buy shares.
Steve, I have to say to you, in a rugby town, how many people in Bath do want a football club as well?
Well, firstly, Bath, we should be very proud about the rugby club in Bath. You know, I'm a supporter of Bath Rugby, have been for 20 years. But this hasn't always been a rugby town. You only go back to the 70s, and Bath City was still getting much bigger crowds than the rugby was. So that's the first thing. It hasn't always been that way. Secondly, I look around Bath and I see lots of young people playing football. I see lots of young people and adults wearing football shirts. Sadly, they're not wearing Bath City shirts. They're wearing, Chelsea, Man United, Bristol Club, Swindon, people like that. So there is clearly a huge interest in football in Bath. It's just not come in the way of the local football club. And Bath City, we have to take responsibility ourselves for a large part of that, because I think for too long we haven't gone out and sold ourselves to the city. So I really believe there is interest in the city in football. There is real potential untapped interest in Bath City Football Club, and especially if we show people that we're not just about 11 men chasing after a ball, or 11 ladies, because we want a strong women's team as well, but we're actually about using football and the appeal of football to help make Bath an even better place and to help develop our community. I think if we can get that message across to people, I think they will say, yes, I do want Bath to have a strong team in the world's biggest sport.